Last week, we talked about the entire timeline between Dave Ramsey and myself when it came to 8 to 10% safe withdrawal rates in my phone call that I made to him in November of 2023. And it was around the time that I was interviewed by Tom, the savings captain, that I became aware of a very interesting device that used to be a mainstay of American culture. And that would be a little red plastic counter that people used to use to add up their groceries. They're like the little clickers that you'd use to track laps or people entering a door, but there are multiple buttons so you can independently record cents, dimes, dollars, and in some instances, $10. If you can see the video version of the podcast, I'm sharing an image of one of these little super Add-O-Matic mechanical calculators that I found on eBay. This particular one has a couple of little metal rivets that seem to be holding it together front to back. I'll talk more about that later. But there are only 3 digits on it. There's cents, dimes, and dollars. While I was researching this topic, I found that even though there was just one place for the dollar sign, some wheels went up into the double digits, up to $29 or so for the larger grocery trips that happened in the 50s. Goodness, I would love a $20, $30 shopping trip now, but these were everywhere, and a lot of them were red. I'm going to show you another one now. This version of the grocery clicker says Fairgrove on it and has a picture of a cash register. It also has a fourth button for $10 place. So this one could theoretically go up to $99.99. And in my opinion, that's something that could be usable today for smaller-ish, medium-sized grocery trips. This third version that I found on eBay is almost identical, but you can see on the side it has a little negative sign. There's a slider that shuffles back and forth underneath the clicking bits so that you can actually subtract items if you were to take something out of your cart and put it back on the shelf. As I find out in the main topic, this is an immensely useful feature for a little mechanical calculator. Now, these mechanical calculators were so prolific back in the day that individual grocery store chains were putting their branding on them. Here is one I found on eBay that has Kroger on the back. It says Kroger helps minimize, with a hyphen, your food costs. It's fascinating to me. If you find one of these in the original packaging, you'll see that it is advertised as something that helps you reduce impulse spending and overspending your budget. And we know that the majority of grocery store purchases made in America today, by a small margin, but still the majority, are unplanned impulse purchases. And I have a theory that these went out of style because grocery stores realized that they were leaving a lot of money on the table by giving customers a tool to keep track of what they were putting in their carts. This history repeated itself back when Kroger had a brief experiment where they gave you a little beeper gun and you could scan items as you put them in the cart, and it would give you a running total as you went through the store. I think that had a really short run and cannot be found the day of this recording because people started spending much less when they were keeping track of what was going in their cart. I've got one more image from eBay that I want to share with you, and this one has 2 of the Fairgrove Add-O-Matic calculators, which have the little slider for adding and subtracting. The one that's partially covered up by my image has one of the clicker pieces actually broken off. There's a very interesting model that looks like a newspaper holder or a mailbox. It only has one giant clicky button on the top, and it has 2 digits underneath it. It says Clover on it. Looks like there are a couple of mechanisms on the side, not sure what they do. But this one looks like it's just recording dollars. Then there's one that says Handy Counter on it. It looks just like the Fairgrove one, doesn't have a way of subtracting, and it's also the bright cherry red that all of these seem to be. These little clicky calculators were everywhere, and it was commonplace to have them at the grocery store. It was a cultural norm to be budget conscious while filling your grocery cart. And I know that I have friends and family who feel like it's weird to take a calculator to the store or be adding things up as they're filling their cart because it's just not the norm anymore. I was so fascinated by this brief bit of American history for grocery shopping that I bought one of these on eBay. What I'm holding in front of me is the handy counter. Very, very similar to the one in the last image that I shared with you from eBay. But this one, instead of being cherry red like most of them are, is black with gold lettering. It's very curious to me that some of them were different colors, but most of them were red. I was so excited to get this thing when it arrived that I couldn't wait to the end of a blood drive to open the package. You see, I was on the way to a blood drive that was being hosted by my local church, and I picked up the mail on the way out of the driveway, and the package for this was there. So I held on to the package, and once I was in the chair getting ready to donate blood, I worked on opening it and pulled out the little handy counter. And I started asking the young volunteers, like, hey, do you know what this is? And they were all very curious about it, but none of them recognized it. And none of them seemed all that interested in a mechanical calculator that helps you add up your groceries. But when I was done donating blood, I went to the little snack table where you wait, you eat your Oreos or your Nutter Butters, and you have a soda. And there was this lady who was sitting there. She had just given blood. And she was probably in her 60s or 70s. And I said, ma'am, do you mind telling me, do you recognize this? And she held it for a while, turned it over in her hands and thought and said, we used to have one. It said O-Matic or something, and it was red. My mom used it when we would go shopping. And me and my siblings would always fight over who got to hold it and who got to click the buttons as mom put groceries in the cart. It was a nostalgic moment for her, and she said she might even still have it sitting in an old box in the attic somewhere. I'm so tickled to have this little knickknack that's a piece of personal financial history back when keeping track of your budget and your groceries was a cultural norm. And I'm very happy to be able to share it with you. I want to also share with you how it sounds when I push the buttons. So I've turned off some of the noise suppression so you can hear it as I click through some of the buttons. I think it sounds rather satisfying. The unfortunate thing about the version I got is it doesn't have the little rivets, the little screws that we saw in the others. So when I click on the 10-cent spot or the dollar spot, especially when it's rolling over a 9 to carry the 1 to the next wheel, it feels like the plastic's trying to separate outward. So I understand why those rivets were important, or those screws were important to hold it together that way. If I were to buy another one of these, I would want one which had the little slider so I could subtract groceries off if I were to take something out of my cart and put it back on the shelf, or if I made a mistake. I would also want one which had those little screws to hold it together better. I might also look for one of these that was a more traditional red, just to say that I have the most common color, as well as this oddball black one with gold letters. If you have any memories, thoughts, or ideas around these little mechanical calculators, please share them in the comments below. And while you do that, we're going to roll into the main topic, where we took this thing to the store and, well, I horribly embarrassed myself.